Hey everyone, Daniel here, and you know what? 2023's been a pretty good year for Superman. Season 3 of Superman and Lois was stellar, My Adventures with Superman dropped, news of Superman's Legacy's casting came out, and you know what? Most of that's been pretty great. Heck, even McFarlane put out a smiling Superman that didn't look atrocious. That's pretty good in my book. Yes, we've gotten all that and more, and us comic fans have actually been blessed with two pretty great Superman runs. And where would Superman even be without the comics? So I thought it might be cool to talk about that for a little bit at year's end. Today we are going to focus on Joshua Williamson's run of Superman. And we'll leave Philip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics for another video, which is sort of sad because, well, his run's coming to an end. But I'd already written the script for this one. As with most things, a lot of this comes down to personal opinion and enjoyment. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. After all, not every comic can appeal to every person. Also, this won't be a complete recap of the story so far. There are plenty of channels that already do that sort of thing if that's what you're looking for. This is more of a rambly review sort of thing. But you should still expect some spoilers as we talk about a comic book. And with that, let's get started. Typically, when I weigh in on a Superman run, especially if I'm trying to assess whether or not it's a good jumping on point, I examine a few different things. The first is the story and the writing. What's the hook? How's the writing, pacing, dialogue, that sort of thing. The next big thing is the art. Comic books are a visual medium. Do I personally enjoy the way these characters are being drawn by this particular artist? And then you have accessibility. This one's a little different. It's how much homework is involved. What other books do I have to read to understand what's going on here? The fourth is staying power, and that's, will anything in this book carry over to future runs? Will anyone still care down the road? That sort of thing. Will there be a new normal in any of this? And the fifth is it just personal, like, cool factors. Like, did I see anything that was like really stellar to me personally? First, a little background. This Superman run is part of DC's relaunch, Dawn of DC. Relaunches aren't always reboots, though they can be. They're usually made to be good jumping on points for new fans or readers who want to get back into the hobby. Relaunches can be done for any number of reasons. Maybe the sales are dipping and, they're trying to inject a little bit of life with new number ones. Or maybe it's something as simple as a new creative team coming in. A big example for a relaunch, at least a big example that I like to use, is the DCU. That's YOU. That's when they first dropped the New 52 label. I remember all of it being like really crazy when this was happening. Like they took away Superman's powers and Jim Gordon was Batman. And if you don't remember any of that, I don't blame you. Something like DC Rebirth would also probably be a good example of a relaunch where it's not a full-on reboot. They're sort of keeping up with the same continuity, but they're injecting in like a lot of new number ones to get, people buying books again. Now, we are currently 10 books into this run. That's 9 numbered books and 1 annual. And for me, that's usually more than enough to know if I like a book or if I like a run, if I'm going to be able to recommend it or not. So a little bit on the background of my personal collection. I have the entire Rebirth run. That's Superman and Action Comics. I was a big fan of the things like Tomasi and Jurgens were doing with the character at the time. Seeing Superman, Lois, and John going on their adventures, being a happy family. I really enjoyed all of that. And then Bendis came. And you know what? I gave his book a fair shake. I believe I had 8 issues of each of his books before finally dropping it. It was Lois crying into John's arms, screaming she missed everything. That really did it in for me. And you know what? In truth, I just really wasn't a fan of everything DC was doing at the time. Sometimes you'll have that. You'll just get creatives on that aren't doing things with the characters that you enjoy. So you move on. So I dropped my books for a little while. Then Tom Taylor took a crack at the book and he put John front and center. And of course, he doubled down on Bendis's age up of John Kent. And I'm still not really the biggest fan of that, though I've, kind of adjusted to it these days. Again, it just proved not to be a book for me. I really wasn't enjoying myself. So I dropped it pretty quickly as well. I mostly kept up with DC canon after that by, reading wikis or watching plot synopsis videos. I do like to stay informed in case anything, seems like it's going to be something that I want to read. But for the most part, I was just not really collecting single issue books at that point anymore. And then Dark Crisis happened. Now, the event as a whole I find to be kind of mid with some highlights, but it did something that I thought was literally impossible. It made me like Teenage John. When I first saw John charging against the Dark Army, I was like, this is hype. And then I learned the dude responsible for this book would be the next writer on Superman. And I was like, you know what? It's a relaunch, number one. Let's dive back into this. And with that, let's talk about the book finally. Let's start with the writing. Straight up, it's solid. The dialogue is great. The pacing is excellent. The characterization is spot on with a few exceptions. And the story so far has me intrigued enough to see it through to the end. Now, a lot of this does kind of feel like a response to the books that came before. You will have that sometimes with relaunches, undoing things that just didn't take. Two big examples of this. Bendis got rid of the Clark Kent secret identity, proved to not be that popular of a decision, and this in Action Comics brings it back. Clark is also once again the main focus instead of his son John, sort of, getting away from the focus on Tom Taylor's run. There are more examples. We could be here all day talking about them, but it's to say that this is sort of a return to form, and it feels like classic Superman adventures that aren't like really seeking to reinvent the wheel. That might come across as playing it safe to some, but I'm really enjoying myself at least. If you want to consider certain things playing it safe, a return of a lot of the fan favorites probably falls into that category. You have Livewire coming back, Silver Banshee, Parasite, they've been all over the covers. And then you also got a lot of like the supporting cast. Jimmy Olsen gets a lot of time to shine in this book. It's great. Though the Super Family itself is mostly focused on an Action Comics, so I think that's for the best. If they were in every issue, it'd probably feel a little bloated here, so it helps sort of break up the way these two books feel. But you do get a little bit of them in here, and anytime I see them, it's so wholesome, and I like looking at it. It's great. The actual story revolves around Supercorp and enemies from Lex Luthor's mysterious past. Ooh, more on that later. We do get a steady trickle of newness mixed in with classic adventure, which helps keep you reading. The new characters are interesting enough, but I really prefer it whenever the classics are center stage. Maybe I'm just old. Mixing them all together does help the story. It keeps you invested. Overall, I'm going to give this book 4.5 superstars when it comes to writing. Next, let's talk about the art. A lot of this really just comes down to preference. Do I like the way these characters are being drawn? Yes or no? So let's get into that. There are a lot of artists that work on Superman. This book's first 5 issues are drawn by Joshua Campbell, who comes back to work on issue 8, and I absolutely love the way he draws the cast. One of my biggest examples that I really just couldn't find a good online picture of happens right here. And Superman saving a couple at their wedding. And right here in his cape, it's the story of Superman just being reflected in its folds. It's amazing. It's visually stunning. Superman is this, square-jawed, broad guy without being a giant. I just really like the way he draws this guy. I'd be lying if I said Jamal Campbell wasn't one of the reasons that I started getting these books again. I mean, for me, the covers alone make you want to read them. They're absolutely gorgeous. I also believe Jamal Campbell does all of the standard issue covers, and those are the ones I normally end up getting anyway. And even if I had a choice in most of these instances, I'd probably grab his because I just like his artwork that much these days. Now, the other artists are no slouches either. Most of them meld well enough with Jamal's style that it's not really that jarring when he's not on the book. You have Gleb Malikov, and I apologize if I pronounced your name or anyone else's name wrong, on issues 6, 7, and 8. Jurgens comes in on issue 7, my man. Other artists on 8 include Norm Ratmund and David Boldion. How much each individual contributed, I really don't know, but they all deserve shout outs. Issue number 9 gives us Bruno Redondo, which I probably find his style to be the most cartoonish. Not that that's bad, it's good enough for me. It's just that's probably the word I would use to describe it. I haven't even mentioned all of the hard work that the colorists, the letterers, the pencilers, and so on have all contributed to these books. Really go check out the credits. Everyone deserves a shout out, but I'd be here all day, like looking up your work and recommending it. The art is also going to receive 4.5 superstars. Now we're on to the accessibility portion. Accessibility. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when I mentioned Supercorp, did you know what I meant? How about Bendis revealing Clark Kent as Superman? Did you know that was a thing that happened? What about the panel I used a little bit ago that showed off the Super Twins? Oh, yeah, Superman has adopted a pair of twins. Orso and Oshel? I'm not quite sure how to pronounce their names, but did you know that they were a thing? Sometimes when you're jumping into a new book, you're going to come across like little continuity things that will reference other books, and you might not exactly know what's going on, and maybe it'll get you to want to read it more, but sometimes it can feel a little intimidating. And these are just a couple of the examples of things that are just sort of there that you need to like look at the editor's note and go, okay, this is a thing, maybe I need to read up on it. So, it's there. Now, in this book's favor, it mostly focuses on the story at hand. There's not a lot of, continuity porn going on. A lot of what's happening is brand new, so it's good for jumping in. They introduce villains in this book without having to worry about what other books they've shown up in. However, that being said, there are a few books that might help with the enjoyment. Philip Kennedy Johnson's War World is a big one. The only one that I would say is almost a required reading would be Action Comics 1050. Action Comics 1050 almost directly leads into this story. It's written by Taylor, who had previously worked on Superman. Philip Kennedy Johnson, who was working on Action Comics, and his run has just ended. And Joshua Williamson also contributed. So it's all of them trying to wrap up their stories and what was going on into the launch of this book. This is where you have, Manchester Black is used by Lex Luthor to erase everyone's memory of Clark Kent as being Superman. A lot of stuff like that's going on. You find out, where the twins came from in case they pop up, though they don't pop up in this book specifically very often. Most of the rest of what's mentioned you could probably just glean from wikis or even just context clues from the book itself. I never felt lost reading this. I've been behind in Superman for a really long time. I'm just now getting caught up on the stuff that Philip Kennedy Johnson's been doing. Also fantastic, by the way. For accessibility, I don't know if I'm being too generous, but I'm going to give this 4 superstars. Its strengths are that it mostly focuses at the story at hand. I can only think of one book that I felt I really had to read before jumping into this run, and the rest just feels like, bonus window dressing. I really think that this is a good spot to get into Superman if you've always wanted to get into like the mainstream continuity. Next up, we got staying power. So, how much of this book story do I think will stick around? Will any of this be the new normal? Or is it just going to be a fun book we can go back to now and again as a classic adventure? One of the biggest changes is Lex Luthor's redemption arc. As I've pointed out a few times, there is a Supercorp now, and that is because Lex Luthor gave LexCorp to Superman. This was after they had a fight in Action Comics 1050, which is one of the reasons I said you probably should go read that book. So Lex Luthor's in prison, and he's trying to become a better person and communicating with Superman and helping him fight crime, or trying to. And, they're dealing with the mysterious Dr. Farm and Mr. Graft from Lex Luthor's past. Now, this isn't the first time Lex Luthor has a redemption arc. It probably won't be the last, which might tell you what I think about the book's staying power. One of DC's biggest mistakes was ever undoing him fighting under the S banner. This happened back in the New 52, and the reason that it was a mistake, them undoing it, is now anytime they try to redeem Lex Luthor again, we aren't going to trust that it'll stick. And a lot of fans don't even think that he should be redeemed, that he should just always be like a Superman villain. But if you're going to try to make these changes, you should try to make some of them stick, if you know what I'm saying. But honestly, I think in a couple more years, we're going to have Lex Luthor back in a power suit or back in a business suit running Lex Corp. He's going to get it back. This will all be part of his plan or something. I honestly don't see this one sticking. The new villains are all neat enough. You have Dr. Farm, Mr. Graft, and the Chained, who I'm sure will pop up now and again. But for me, I'm just not invested in them as I think the book wants me to be. Not yet, anyway. That could always change as I read more and get more invested. The Chained is probably the neatest so far, mostly just because, he's connected to Stryker Island, which is, a big thing in DC. Uh, Dr. Farm and Mr. Graft are the bad guys from Lex Luthor's past. And I just, I don't see a lot of that just really sticking around right at this moment. Now, who I think will be sticking around for a while and is likely to get there in book is the mysterious Marilyn Moonlight. I'm going to be honest, I love this character's design. The Moonglow is absolute peak, and the Western theme is just different enough so she stands out in Metropolis. And unlike a couple of the villains, I am sort of interested in her origin and how she relates to Lex Luthor. With that line of thought, I'm also not sure how long Lex Luthor's early career of a hero will stick. I kind of sort of hope it does. It kind of gives him a neat little connection to Superman, him being sort of a failed hero and Superman being, a hero that rose to the occasion. I like that dynamic. There are two things that I don't think will stick, but I really, really hope they do. And if, Joshua Williamson is able to, make this the new normal, he'd probably be my personal hero. The first one is Lois Lane running the Daily Planet. I honestly think this is a great direction for her character. It's a way to evolve her character without, forcing superpowers on her. Perry White retired after, having an aneurysm because of, comic shenanigans. And he's now running for mayor. And Lois Lane is running the Daily Planet. It's just, I really enjoy that. The second one is Jimmy Olsen. My God, my boy, my Jimmy. Jimmy is dating Silver Banshee, and I absolutely love this. It is so freaking cute. Jimmy Olsen has always, sort of been a guy who got into the weirdest of comic shenanigans. He's dated villains before. He's dated aliens. He's dated celebrities. He's fallen into crowds. But this one, I love the way the book sets it up, and I honestly think that if they play their cards right, they could make this a thing. And some people be like, oh, what about Silver Banshee being a villain? I think Silver Banshee is a villain that you could retire and people wouldn't, absolutely hate it. She's a hero. She's a villain that you could probably turn into a hero and everything would be okay. Or you could, have her go back and forth a little bit. But as long as she's with Jimmy, I'd be pretty happy. I don't see it lasting long term, but my God, am I rooting for it. Power, I'm going to give this book 3 superstars. There's a lot of potential here for some new normal, for some fun stuff, but I'm not sure how much of it's going to last. This is just a little bonus portion. I'm a feat guy. I'm really into the versus battle stuff. So, what sort of stuff are we getting along those lines in this comic? This is supposed to be Superman at the strongest he's ever been. So how are all of his, paltry Earth villains supposed to stand up to him? Well, Dr. Farm and Mr. Graff have been upgrading them. Here we have a parasite being turned into a living virus that can infect people and multiply and, drain energy out of the cells directly just as tiny little microbes. That's super scary. They upgraded Silver Banshee to be able to scream louder than she's ever screamed before, and this was to get rid of Superman's super rating for a day so that they could attack Lex Luthor while he was in prison, and that was really cool to see. Our best showings, though, right now are really coming from the new villain, the Chained Stryker. He has the same powers as Connor Kent's Superboy, which is tactile telekinesis, only his tactile telekinesis is way, way stronger. So anything that Superboy has done in the past or is currently doing, Stryker should theoretically be able to do way better. So that's sort of neat. I kind of hope to see it really explored, something super crazy happen, but we really haven't gotten anything along those lines yet. The best thing that we've gotten is Superman escaping from the Chain's prison, which reflects whatever power you're using back at you. So no matter how strong you are, it will reflect super strength back in that direction with the exact same force. So Superman had to use multiple powers in tandem in order to get around that prison system. And that was sort of neat, but we really haven't gotten a crazy feat like Superman throwing a galaxy or anything yet. I'm not going to knock any points for that because at the end of the day, I care more about the story than stuff like that. and the story is fantastic. It's just, I'm kind of hoping to see some like really crazy cosmic stuff somewhere along the line. That I'm getting more of that in Action Comics, and that's sort of fun. That's going to bring the Williamson run so far up to 4 superstars. And you know what? That places it right along the same range of a lot of my favorite Superman books and runs. Now, I'm a critical guy, I'm a cynical guy, and I believe it's important that we're able to pull ourselves back when we evaluate things. You should be able to be critical of things you enjoy. Who knows, maybe that's just me, maybe I enjoy being a little bit critical, and I hope I didn't come off as too critical here because the book is fantastic. But I wanted to, put my thoughts, both positive and negatives, out there, especially if I'm going to recommend something that you're going to have to spend hard-earned money on. After all, this is a hobby, and hobbies can get expensive. So overall, I think this is a really good time to get into Superman books. There is a lot to love here. And you know what? I'm having a really good time with it. I can't wait to see what Williamson does next. And I'm thinking of checking out some of the other books he's writing right now because of this one. But I want to hear what you all think. Have you read this book, or has my little review made you a little curious about checking it out? Sound off in the comments. If you've enjoyed your time here, make sure to like, share, and follow, and all of that other nonsense. Anyway, that has been Daniel with Truth, Justice, and all of that nonsense. I'll check y'all next time.